Lieutenant Governor Malcolm Wilson, Controller Leavitt, Attorney General Lefkowitz, Majority Leader Earl Bridges of the Senate, Speaker Perry Duryea, and members of both houses of the legislature. May I just say as a personal note that there has never been a more dedicated, a more devoted, a brilliant group of leaders in any state than we are fortunate to have on this dais right behind me here today in New York State. Nor more able legislators than are to be found in both houses of this great legislature of the Empire State. Unfortunately, time does not permit that I read the full message. Therefore, with your permission, I will give some highlights for this gathering. 5 days ago in this chamber, I spoke to the people of the unfinished tasks that lie before us and of past achievements that have enabled us to build for the future with a sense of hope. Far removed as fulfillment of our goals may be, the groundwork has been laid. That is why, in spite of all the difficulties ahead, my inaugural address was a message of confidence and hope. It reflects my unshakable conviction that there is nothing wrong with America, that courage, dedication, and love cannot conquer. There's nothing wrong with America that we don't have the human and natural resources to overcome. As in all human hopes and ambitions, there is one condition attached to this outlook, a condition involving the free will of people to reject partisanship and political division. The record of this state during the past 12 years has demonstrated the value of government which holds the common good to be more important than party politics. It offers us an example of true cooperation, of partnership between the legislature, the executive branch, community leaders, and the people to make significant advances in serving human needs. Together, we have created an economic climate that has made possible the addition of 1 million new jobs to the state's economy. Together, we have taken innovative steps to provide the training demanded by today's complex economy and to offer incentives to help people move from welfare rolls to payrolls and to tax rolls. Together, we have expanded educational opportunities to a degree so that no young person in this state need ever be denied the opportunity of higher education or advanced training for the lack of personal means or educational facilities. Together, we have established the legal framework and commenced the task of rescuing our environment, our water, our air, our land from pollution. Together, we have created structures to help meet the needs of the problems of transportation, housing, industrial development in an increasingly urbanized society. Together, we have led the nation in the expansion and improvement of care available to the physically and mentally ill. Together, we have led the nation in using every promising method to deal with the scourge of narcotics. And together, we have taken important steps to make our communities safer, healthier, and more attractive places in which to live and work and bring up our children. That which we have achieved provides a firm foundation upon which to build for the future. The following are the major initiatives that we must now take and that are essential to more fully meeting the people's needs in the years ahead. I've grouped these goals under 6 major headings. First, the economy, maintaining a climate and developing new incentives for the growth of 400,000 new jobs in the next 4 years, developing more effective manpower training programs, and helping the Vietnam veterans and the defense workers in the transition from war to peace. The individual, second, adoption of a universal health insurance program, development of an adequate health care delivery system to assure the availability of good health care for all, making our educational system more relevant to today's needs, increasing participation and meaningful involvement of youth in our society, and stronger incentives for people to move, as I mentioned before, from welfare rolls to payrolls and self-sufficiency. 3, community life. Second passage and adoption next fall of the Community Development Article. Adoption of a community development program and bond issue to help reverse the trend of urban decay and to encourage major expansion of housing and urban development. Further improvement of public transportation and other community services. 4, narcotics and crime. Enactment of a Safe Streets Act and other actions to step up the fight against crime. Reorganization of the courts to speed up the judicial process. Prison reform and expansion of state and local programs for combating narcotic addictions. 5th, the environment. Completion of the Pure Waters program to end water pollution, strict enforcement of state timetables for ending air pollution, and a Clean Streets program to help local communities meet the solid waste disposal problem by helping them with capital equipment and construction requirements, and additional legislation to control noise pollution. 6, responsive federalism. Federal revenue sharing of $10 billion of new money, effective July 1, 1971, including $1 billion for New York State and its local governments. States' performance standards on all state-sponsored and state-supported programs and state audit of all local governments. And state legislation to permit localities to eliminate overlapping in tax structures, administrative functions, and jurisdictions of local government. The actions which I propose today are of the highest priorities. I will submit later to your honorable bodies special messages detailing each of the general recommendations set forth today. In addition, I will send special messages and recommendations on other important matters, including human rights, consumer protection, and highway safety. There are many other important and desirable programs that will have to be deferred in the view of the severe financial situation faced by the state and its local governments. For this is a time when a government, just like a family, must tighten its belt and live within its resources. In this connection, it is appropriate that I give you a brief review of the state's fiscal situation. It clearly indicates the difficulties of meeting the fiscal requirements of even those programs to which the state is already committed. The following are the basic facts. First, state aid. Under existing legislation, state public school aid will increase again in the coming fiscal year by more than $175 million. State revenue sharing, which was enacted last year by your honorable bodies to help relieve our hard-pressed cities and other local governments, will increase aid to local governments by another $200 million this coming year. All other state aid will also be increased as required under existing law by more than $400 million. Secondly, state operations. Last year's labor negotiations and previous legislation improving benefits for state employees, necessary to keep their compensation equitable, especially in this difficult period of inflation, require wage and fringe benefit increases in next year's budget of more than $230 million. In addition to sustain present state-operated programs, will require other increases totaling about $300 million. These include the state's ongoing programs for the care of the mentally ill, the operation of the state university, and the programs in health and narcotic addiction control and rehabilitation. The total of all of these will require an increase of approximately $1.3 billion in the 1971-72 state budget. And all of this is before taking into consideration urgent appeals for additional increases in state aid, which include $300 million to $1 billion of requests for increased aid from the schools, and $1 billion to $1.5 billion of requests for increased aid from local governments, including the big 6 cities. In addition, our fiscal outlets outlook is further complicated by the fact that we're rapidly running out of bond authorizations to meet the capital needs of our people for such services as transportation and housing. We face this bleak fiscal picture despite the fact that I have already eliminated some $403 million from next year's budget requests of State Departments and agency heads for desirable new or expanded programs. Our problem is that the state is already giving 63 cents of each tax dollar back to local governments, and New York State and other local governments, their combined taxes are the highest per capita of any state in the nation. We're now reaching the point at which the state and its local governments cannot alone keep up with the needs for major annual increases in revenues. To continue to provide the necessary basic services, state government and their communities must get financial help from the federal government, which collects 2/3 of all our taxes and gives us back only 11 cents on the dollar they collect to help support state and local governments. Unless the downward spiral, particularly in the urban areas, is reversed, we will be faced with a disastrous breakdown of essential community services. That is why I've been pressing vigorously continuous campaign for a $10 billion federal revenue sharing program of new money from the federal government to take effect July 1 of this year, of which New York State and its local governments would receive approximately $1 billion. In fact, 2 other governors and I met with President Nixon on this subject once again only yesterday. Later this month, the President will deliver his annual State of the Union message. I will defer final decision on the state's financial plan until after the President's message. Then we should know more about the course of action the federal government may take to avoid a collapse of state and local government services across the nation, particularly in the urban areas. Though the state's fiscal picture for the moment must necessarily remain incomplete, the other major areas of legislative action in the coming year are clear. Therefore, I will set forth the following important elements of the administration's 1971-72 legislative program. First, the economy. Fortunately, business and job opportunities have been brighter in New York State than in the nation generally. Despite the unfortunate high unemployment areas, the economy of the state as a whole showed remarkable stability in 1970 in the face of a national economic slowdown. I have pledged all-out state support of a goal of 400,000 new jobs in the next 4 years and the necessary training programs to assure that the people who are available to fill these jobs have the skills to match the demands. I'm asking the Manpower Resources Commission to develop a proposal for the creation of a comprehensive manpower agency, and I will recommend the necessary appropriations for manpower training and development under the State Manpower Training Act. To provide further help to workers affected by defense cutbacks, I will recommend legislative and budget action to establish a relocation assistance corporation to guarantee relocation loans at reasonable rates to individuals who have lost their jobs due to a defense cutback or other dislocations. I shall recommend action to provide early unemployment compensation coverage for some 400,000 nonprofit workers in nonprofit organizations, and legislation to extend unemployment benefits for an additional 13 weeks. This year we will introduce our computerized job bank system into new areas, such as Long Island, Westchester, and additional locations in New York City, which will also enable us to expand the job exchange system. Since 1959, the state's economy has been vitalized by 7,700 new plants and plant expansions. The action we have taken together have contributed immeasurably to this proud record. I will create a new office for service industries in the State Commerce Department to sell service industry employers to the advantage of doing business in New York State. I will recommend legislation to expedite the selection and approval of sites for new power plants, taking into consideration any adverse effects upon the environment. Second, the individual. Basic to self-reliance and a productive life in our complex modern society are a good education and the availability of good health care for all. A principal objective of this coming year must be the passage of a system of universal health insurance, at least in New York State and hopefully on a national basis. Universal health insurance program I will propose will extend a basic benefit policy in two categories of persons: those who have no health insurance at the present and those whose present health insurance is inadequate or costs more than they can afford. It will also place the payment of cost on a more equitable basis, with employers paying a share of the premiums for employees who currently pay the entire cost. A nationwide program is the best approach, but until federal government acts in this area, the health needs of New Yorkers must be met. I will also propose legislation authorizing the establishment of nonprofit medical corporations that would permit physicians to work with hospitals to provide prepaid, comprehensive, family-centered health care. I will recommend additional legislation this year to expand the hospital and nursing home loan program to new types of health facilities such as outpatient clinics and specialized rehabilitation centers. Based on a report of the Governor's Steering Committee on Social Problems to be available shortly, I expect to offer additional measures to increase the supply and availability of health professional personnel, including physicians. I will propose legislation to establish the new medical occupation of physician's assistant and to promote the development of appropriate education and training programs for this occupation. Now, the President has set a national goal of making voluntary subsidized family planning assistance available to all citizens in this country by 1975. In order to help meet the President's National Family Service Goal, Planning Service Goal, I am directing the State Health Department to develop detailed plans to avail New York of the federal assistance appropriate for this purpose. The State Public Health Council has recommended lowering the maximum period of pregnancy during which an abortion can be performed from the present 24 weeks to 20 weeks. I support this recommendation. And I've requested the State Public Health Council to continue reviewing the state's experience under the abortion law to make any further recommendations to protect the health of women, both residents and non-residents, undergoing abortions in this state. I would submit legislation to increase the availability of special health services to meet the needs of older people. Now, in the area of mental health, we will continue improvement of staffing at the mental hospitals and institutions, decentralization of the large institutions, and continued development of programs to meet the unique needs of special patient groups. In the field of education, our aim must be to gain control over the relentless rise in educational costs, while maintaining the quality that has come to be the hallmark of education in this state. State school aid will be increased by more than $175 million in the state budget for fiscal 1971-72, but any increase beyond that level will depend importantly on whether the federal government will assume a larger share of the nation's educational cost than the 5% of those costs that Washington now provides. Unfortunately, at no point has the future of parochial and other non-public school been more bleak. If non-public schools fail their students and the cost of their education are added to the already overburdened public schools. Last year, your honorable bodies approved the first passage of the Blaine Amendment repeal and substitution of it by the less restrictive language of the First Amendment of the Federal Constitution regarding separation of church and state. I remain convinced that this amendment will afford all of the constitutional safeguards we need, while at the same time giving the state maximum flexibility to deal with the educational problems and needs of all school children. It will also remove the barrier which now exists between Bundy aid and many of our private colleges and universities, which are in dire financial strait. Therefore, I urge second passage of Blaine repeal by your honorable bodies and its approval by the voters next fall. I will propose the creation of a state office of Child Development to plan and coordinate all state efforts to expand daycare centers. Now, in connection with higher education, I will propose continuation of the expansion plan for the State University, aid to City University of New York under the present 50-50 matching aid formula, and Bundy program of aid to private colleges. I will propose a realistic increase in the maximum amount students may borrow under higher educational assistance. And I will continue a special effort, the Youth Clearinghouse concept, which I have initiated to provide within the Executive Chamber an ongoing channel of communication with the college students of this state, and I will submit legislation to create a student intern program in state government. In addition, I urge second passage of the constitutional amendment lowering the voting age to 18. This action is especially desirable now to assure a full opportunity to vote in this state, since the federal government has already lowered the voting age to 18 for federal elections. Next, welfare and the Family Assistance Plan. I will continue to support passage of the National Administration's Family Assistance Plan, with amendments that would recognize and relieve the special problems of states like New York, which get a disproportionate share of the national welfare migration. Your distinguished Speaker of the Assembly, Perry Duryea, has made an excellent proposal in the event that Congress does not pass the Family Assistance Plan for the whole country. Speaker Duryea recommends that in that case, the Congress at least try out the plan on an experimental basis in one area, such as New York City, which suffers the nation's most serious welfare problems. I will also continue to urge gradual federal takeover of all state and local welfare costs. In the meantime, in order to keep welfare benefits abreast of the increased cost of living, I will submit for your consideration a 7.2% welfare benefit increase recommended by the State Board of Social Welfare as required by the law. Now, third, community life. Unfortunately, too many of our communities continue to be trapped in a downward spiral of urban decay and breakdown of services. This trend must be reversed. We must save our urban centers by preserving the incentives for investment in those centers and encouraging the development of viable communities within them. I therefore strongly urge you to give second passage to the Community Development Article of the state constitution and to work together for its approval by the voters this fall. The new article would allow the state to become a greater catalyst and a closer partner with the private sector and local government in meeting community needs. But essential to the success of the revitalization of our communities will be the capital resources to do the job. I will therefore submit to your honorable bodies a proposal for a substantial community development bond issue for your approval and submission to the voters this fall. With the passage of the Community Development Article and the approval of the Community Development Program and bond issue, New York State, in partnership with local governments and private sectors, will be able to breathe new life into our deteriorating urban communities. I view the Community Development Article and bond issue, together with a universal health insurance program, as the most important legislative objectives that I'm presenting to you today, and I will address myself to them further in special messages. Other important recommendations involve crime and narcotics, the environment, and responsive federalism. Unfortunately, time does not permit my detailing them now, but they are covered in the full message which you have before you. This then completes my review of the major recommendations I will make to your honorable bodies in this annual message. I will communicate other legislative recommendations to you in the following weeks. The year now before us will be a testing time, not alone for our state, but for the entire system of federalism. Many local governments, particularly our great cities, verge on actual financial collapse. And now, for the first time, the states also find their backs to the financial or fiscal wall. Yet, while state and local governments must bear the nation's domestic burdens, The federal government, most of the nation's domestic burdens, the federal government collects most of the taxes. Our federal system has reached a crucial point. We recognize realistically that we as a single state can no longer realize our future hopes alone. It is a time of testing for our national government. Only through the effective joint action of all levels of government working together on a coordinated basis can we effectively meet people's needs and shape our future. These hard realities dictate the course to which we must commit ourselves. Let us tighten our belts and exercise our imagination fully to do what must be done to meet the people's needs within our limited means. But at the same time, let us press vigorously for our national government to start shouldering more of the nation's needs right here at home. With God's help, let us continue to maintain New York as a model to the nation of what creative, responsible state government can achieve for the people. I thank you very much indeed. Best of luck. How's that for time? I just took 15